Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast. This episode features the king of South Australian basketball. They retired his number 5 and gave him the rare honour of naming the court after him. He is, of course, 3-time Olympian, Brett Maher. Mr. Brett Maher, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you going?
Good, thanks. Good. I really appreciate you jumping on, taking a bit of time out of your day to have a chat.
Yeah, no problems. I've had to put this through my phone. We've had a blackout in the house, so
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I apologise for that, but we're going through my phone.
No, that's okay. That's commitment to the job. So, look, I'm really looking forward to this because I think, especially with having you as a guest, Brett, is an opportunity to sort of go a little bit behind the scenes. Obviously, you're a very high-profile player, and I'll go through your resume shortly to just remind the fans and those in the under-12s, under-14s that might be listening of exactly what you went through in your career. But just looking back at, I guess, what's behind the scenes of being an NBL captain as well, and what we might not see, and sort of the pathway, because I guess, as we'll discuss, your pathway was a little bit different to sort of the more common pathway these days of going to college and those sort of things. So before we get into that, can you just sort of give the listeners a quick rundown of sort of where we find you these days and what life's like for you at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. At the moment, I work for the South Australian Metropolitan Fire Service. So, full-time there. I work in the main station in town and love doing that. It's a really good environment. It's very similar to, I guess, a sporting environment where there's a lot of different challenges and different things every day, and get to have a lot of fun with a really good group of guys and girls in there. So that's been really good. I also run a business called All World Tours, which runs predominantly basketball tours, but other sports as well, tours to international destinations. We take club teams and school teams over, organise games, organise experiences and NBA games or whatever for the kids to enjoy and have really good fun trips. And that kind of started from me when I was young. I went on one of the tours and loved it, and it's kind of been a bit of a passion of mine, and I've been doing that for quite a while now.
Yeah, awesome. And for those interested, we will touch on at the end how to sort of visit the links and websites and how to sort of inquire about those things, and we'll put those in the show notes as well. But you obviously got your hands pretty full. In terms of the firefighter stuff, is that sort of something you thought about while you were playing?
Not really while I was playing. My father was in the fire service, so he was in the army initially and then joined the fire service and was in the fire service for probably 25 to 30 years. So it kind of has been in the family a little bit. I knew what I was getting into. Initially, once I finished playing, it wasn't I didn't want to jump into that straight away, but after a couple of years of being out of the game, that was something that I really wanted to do, and eventually got in there. So it was good. Yeah.
Do you think it was? I mean, we've talked to Scott and Lucas in the last couple of podcasts, is sort of about when you finish up, really missing that team sort of aspect of it, and working with a group of other guys. Do you think was a part of going into the fire service?
I think it's a real attraction. The fire service, and it's still predominantly a male-orientated job. Guys having a lot of fun, but there are more and more girls coming in, which I think is really good for the service as well. But yeah, I think the environment that's there, it's hard to recreate that sporting environment, but I've found that this is probably one of the best jobs as far as getting close to that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's really interesting because, that was something else they mentioned, comparing the highs and lows of basketball and how do you sort of fill that cup up when you're out of it, and the adrenaline. We had very, very differing responses from our previous guests. So, that's really interesting that you mentioned that, but we'll touch on that as we go. Right now, I'll just outline for those, the professional career. So, essentially, outside of the AIS, went into playing for the Adelaide 36ers, and rare thing these days, a one-club player. which is very foreign to in the last decade or so. So from 1992 to 2009, for the listeners, and an NBL champion in 1998, 1999, and 2002, of which the last two, the 1999 and 2002, was also the finals MVP. And achieved all those as captain of the side as well. A full-time NBL All-Star, had your number retired by Adelaide, and as has been well documented, actually had the court named after you, which is a massive honour. There's not too many sports people, basketball or any other sport that's had that. I think the only thing that can sort of come close is like a Rod Laver Arena or something like that. So that's massive. So congratulations on that. And then you look at the Olympics, 1996, which we'll touch on later because we also spoke to Scott Fisher about that Olympic Games a couple of days ago. And then Sydney, obviously a massive one. I think you finished fourth in both of those. Is that right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the first two we finished fourth, and the last one we unfortunately got put in the bottom section and finished ninth in that one.
Yeah, so that was Athens, I believe. Yeah. And then in terms of world championships, which obviously we've got one just around the corner in August in the Philippines, you participated in 1998. Where was that one?
That was in Athens also.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then you captained Australia at the Goodwill Games, which is obviously everyone listening to this podcast is obviously a hoops fan, so that's pretty much the holy grail. So a massive honour there, and just I guess sort of a massive career, really. I guess from this spot on, a lot of people in Adelaide. Adelaide's obviously a massive basketball town. I'm recording this from Melbourne, but I think everyone in Melbourne understands just how fanatical Adelaide people are about basketball. It was only a couple of weeks ago we had the Junior Classic here, and it's like half of Adelaide rolls into town. And I was sitting with some Norwood parents, and they're filling me in on the junior scene over there and what's going on and how much, and then the Sturt guys are like, yeah, we beat Norwood back home. And, it's like it's so, it really is like a freight train that comes through Melbourne for the juniors. So I guess that leads into what was your juniors like? At what age did you start playing? What clubs were you playing for? That sort of thing.
I started at South Adelaide Basketball Club. I was playing at school a fair bit with friends. All my friends were playing, so I started there and wanted to take it a bit further. So I joined South Adelaide and played there for a couple of years, and then had a good friend playing over at Sturt Basketball Club, and they were pretty dominant at the time. So I went over and joined the Sturt team, and we played under 14 nationals and came through all my juniors with Sturt, and had a fairly successful program there. And I remember playing, I still am really close friends with Rupert Sackwell, and remember playing them in the under 14 nationals. He was playing for the very powerful Nunawading Inspectors at the time.
Right.
And I think they beat us 121-2 or something like that.
Wow. Jeez.
But then the next year we went on and came second at the under-14 nationals, and it kind of progressed quite well. From there I stayed at Sturt, as I said, and then at the age of 15 went over to the Institute.
Yeah, sure. So did you, moving over so young, did you even get a chance to play like SA Metro sort of thing?
Yeah, so I played SA Metro under 16s right the way through to under 20, and was lucky enough to play kind of bottom year and top year in those. We generally did pretty well. We a lot of times, unfortunately, came second to Victoria, but competitive. And then finally in under 20s, we won one.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And in terms of at school, like obviously as a player, I don't think this is going to be any sort of shock statement that a lot of people saw you as a very intelligent player, like a problem-solving sort of point guard, shooting guard, whether it was using screens or, leading offenses, leading defenses, that sort of thing. What were you like actually in the classroom, though? Were you someone that enjoyed academics and that sort of thing, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I didn't mind academics. I was kind of I stayed in Adelaide till the end of year 10, and I was pretty much a straight A student then. When I went over to the Institute of Sport, my grades tended to drop a little bit.
Yeah.
I was focused in the sports side and dropped off from the school side a little bit, and started getting kind of A's, B's, and C's. And my parents weren't all that happy with that, and made some changes, I guess, at the Institute at the time. And that was around the time study hall got bought in at the Institute, which probably isn't one of the best parts of going to the Australian Institute of Sport, getting made to study. But that was kind of instigated. I don't know if it's due to my dropping grades, but it was certainly around that time.
The Brett Maher study hall, we'll call it.
Yeah, but so it wasn't too bad at school anyway.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting, because I think that's the side of things us as fans don't usually get to see. Now, obviously, talk about the AIS and taking up that scholarship these days. It's obviously hundreds, maybe even thousands of kids go across to varying levels of college and JUCO and high school and those sort of things. Back then, sort of other than Andrew Gay's going to Seton Hall and a couple of others, was that ever a thought for you, or not necessarily?
Yeah, it was very, very near possibility.
Right.
When I shoot, I was there for 3 years. In my second year, Arizona were heavily recruiting me under Lute Olson. It was a unbelievable program, and I was really considering whether to go there or to come back and play for the 36ers. It was around the time of the World Junior Championships that I played in, and about 8 months before that, I did my cruciate.
Right.
My right cruciate, snapped that. So I had 6 months to the day recovery, and then got back into heavy training and just scraped into that World Championship team. And Arizona sent some scouts over to the World Championships, and I went from kind of starting point guard due to that to coming off the bench and probably not playing as much time. And I guess the feedback after that World Championships was that they could probably get someone of my level or better from just what they'd seen of me coming off the bench. And they ended up going on. I think that year they had 3 or 4 guys that ended up playing NBA.
Right.
They did recruit quite well.
Yeah.
But, so it was a very near possibility, and probably due to, that cruciate injury didn't fulfill. But then I kind of spent an extra year at the Institute, and then came back and, joined the 36ers.
How was that time for you? Because obviously that's a fair bit of adversity. You go from, starting point guard with, I think most people would know Lute Olson that would be a massive coach to play under and an amazing opportunity. How'd you go mentally with that? Because obviously, one of the more recent ones is like Angus Glover coming back from multiple injuries to where he is now. Did it knock you around a bit, or was it just sort of like, it is what it is and we move on?
Yeah, I think the first couple of weeks it hits you pretty hard. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it could be the end of my career at the age of 16, but I went through some of my recovery. I was in Canberra with some of the guys, Bradley Clyde from the Raiders, some of those guys, and it was really good to go through with some other pretty good athletes in their recovery, and it kind of helped mine. And I was lucky nothing really went wrong with my weights and recovery program, and was, as I said, get back 6 months to the day, and it's been probably as strong or stronger ever since. So it was not a blessing, but it made me, I guess, refocus my goals, and it was kind of good that I did have other avenues to go down, and be able to come and play back for the 36ers was a pretty good option to take.
Yeah, and I'm sure they didn't need much convincing to have you come along. But 6 months to the day, I mean, I'm no medical expert, but that's a pretty quick recovery, is it not? From a
back then I had it taken from a hamstring and pulled down through my knee, and we had. I think it's the best place to have an injury if you're at the got the best physios, best doctors. You can have treatment every single day. We had Julian was our weights guy then, and he was exceptional. And I guess over that period, my vertical leap increased about 15 centimetres due to all the weights and jumping exercise and that we're doing, which kind of took me from a guy that played below the ring. And some may find it hard to believe, but especially in the early days, I could get up above the ring on occasion. So it did help a lot.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Well, there's a bit of incentive for people to really work on their strength and conditioning side of things to because it isn't a waste of time, and you can obviously push through that. One last thing to touch on with the AIS stuff. Obviously, we're now talking NBA Global Academy and Centre of Excellence in Canberra. But for the parents listening out there, because there will be a lot of them who watched you play and now have children at sort of 16, 17, 18 years of age. What did that process actually involve? Was it the AIS coaches watching you at nationals and then having a meeting with your parents? What sort of went down there?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess they'd seen me my first year under 16s, and I did quite well there at nationals. And then in my second year under 16s, I played quite well, and I got selected to be part of the All-Australian camp. And I was told before that I'd be having the year scholarship, and then at the end of each year they, I guess, just renew the scholarship depending on how well you're going and how well you're handling it. But for a 15-year-old to leave home, I didn't realise, now parent myself of kids that sort of age, I didn't realise kind of what toll it would take on my parents. And for me, it was just a great adventure, but it would be pretty hard on the parents, kind of losing your kid for a year and going away. But it was a real steep learning curve for me because my parents did everything for me.
Right.
Growing up, and then all of a sudden you have to start doing your own washing and fending for yourself a little bit. And I think it kind of really helped me in some ways there.
Yeah, definitely. It obviously a quick learning curve. And then obviously we move on from, I believe it was 1992, is that correct? You go across to the Adelaide 36ers?
Yeah, 92 was my first year.
Yeah, and obviously going from a really talented junior to the pro leagues, was it, in your mind, was it like a duck to water, or did you find big differences? What was the sort of experience there?
It was a huge jump. That was the first year of what was then the Capsule powerhouse. So it was a real exciting time. I kind of grew up going to games at the old Apollo Stadium in Adelaide, which was probably a little bit similar to like the Snake Pit in Illawarra, and that real enclosed field. And to go to a fully purpose-built venue and play there was huge. But it was a real experienced team as well that I was moving into, guys that I'd grown up watching, guys like Mark Davis, Mike Mackay, those sort of guys. It was kind of a big thrill for me to play with those guys, and I learned a lot in those early years, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Do you go from, is there any sort of starstruckness, or you just one of the guys playing hoops?
I think you just try and fit in and make your mark. For me, Butch Hayes was the point guard at that time, one of the, I think, the best and smartest point guards that's come out to Australia, and to boot, a really nice guy. And to play under him in my first year, I think I couldn't have asked for much more. And then you bring in guys in my early years that I got to play with and alongside, like Phil Smythe, etc., that you can learn so much from. I was pretty lucky in my development to get those guys early. Yeah,
and what would you describe sort of the culture like in those sort of first 3 or 4 years? We had a chat with as I said, Scott Fisher, and he was talking about the difference between playing at the North Melbourne Giants when he arrived and being I guess one really tight unit altogether, and would hang out outside of basketball and were just all together. And then going to Perth, it was like just like, we're here to win, we're here to dominate, we're going to train hard. They would get in fist fights all the time, and then when training was finished, it was sort of like, go your own way. Neither's obviously right or wrong, but there's going to be some sort of culture. What was it like at Adelaide at that time?
Yeah, I think it was competitive. There was still a bit of a winning culture in Adelaide at the time. The team had won in '86 and had some really good teams kind of beyond that as well. There'd been a bit of change and turnover in the coaches. Obviously, Ken Cole was the coach in '86. Gary Fox came in, and then Don Shipway was there when I came into the team. So that was probably the unsettling thing, is the coach turnover. What I really liked about the Adelaide teams then and in the early days, and not just Adelaide, but teams all over the country, is that the teams were pretty much full of players from that state. So our whole team was pretty much South Australian plus imports, which I think is really missing from the game this time, for the fans to identify with players from that state. I mean, if I'm to look harshly on the 36ers, there's not many 36ers many South Australians in that team. You've got Nick Marshall, who's just broken in, but there's not many. Whereas where I came in, there was Mark Bradkey, there was Daryl Pearce, Mike Mackay, Scott Ninnis, Ray Wood, Peter Allo, all of those sort of guys that were South Australians. And I think that's a bit of a shame that that's gone out of the teams these days.
Oh, 100%. And I think, one current coach has already sort of identified that, whether he's sort of accented or not. I know Muddy Maher over in the Breakers has said that now that they're back home after COVID, he really wants to build a New Zealand core. And I think that's really important. It's just whether or not teams do it, I guess, because Southeast Melbourne Phoenix have, in this area, in the Southeast, do a lot with the associations. And then obviously they look at recruiting players from Frankston or Knox or Kilsyth or any of those clubs and try and get sort of the grassroots clubs to really get behind the club. And I think that's definitely missing, because when you go back and watch, and I implore anyone that listens to this podcast to go back and watch YouTube videos of just the whole crowd and the vibe and what it was like in 90s basketball when you had guys playing for their home team. Like it was next level. Like you mentioned the snake pit before, like it looked like at any time there was going to be a bloody all-in brawl, and, then when you throw the coaches sort of, going off, I remember watching one of Bruce Palmer, getting some tech fouls, and then it's just crazy. Like sidelines are disappearing because people are walking over them. And I think if we can get that back, I think that would be really good. And I think, I don't want to give too much of my opinion here because you're the guest, but I guess on the junior level, we're not always seeing Vic Metro dominate as much all the time now. So I think that we're starting to open that scope now where states can look at trying to bring back their juniors, whether they've gone to college or the Centre of Excellence, because we are seeing, other states be really, really competitive and win, like you guys did in under-20s, national championships. So hopefully that's something that we see in the future. Yeah, sort of leading from, when you started at Adelaide and leading up to, becoming captain 5 years later, these days we see in sports, whether it's basketball or football or whatever the sport is, there's a lot of emphasis on professional development, and then captains and coaches going to learn from, like the infamous one down here in Victoria is a lot of coaches go to listen to Craig Bellamy from the Melbourne Storm, talk about his coaching philosophy. And then he came down to, I remember, I think it was one, Brian Gorgon had the Boomers and looked at, how they do their zone defense and like a lot of cross-code stuff. Obviously grew with leadership qualities. Was there any of that back then that you would do extracurricular stuff to learn from other people or mentors or anything like that?
Not really. Our resources were pretty strapped back then. We had Mike Dunlap as a coach fairly on in that period where I was appointed captain, and he was really, I guess, more pro the younger guys coming out of that college system. And there's not too many people that would have given me that chance that early in my career, and started me in front of Phil Smythe, who was still in the Australian team. So kind of for me and my development, he was absolutely fantastic and gave me a lot of opportunities. I remember taking over the captaincy from Mark Davis, who, of course, is one of the best players all time in the league, and 6'6" and physically imposing. So people just listened to him when he talked, and he kind of sat me down and we had a good chat about some things that I could possibly look at doing. I wasn't really a really loud speaker or a yeller at that point in time. So it was more about what I could do on the court and then pick my moments to say kind of important things rather than talking all the time. And I guess as my career went on in the captaincy, I developed more and more and became more outspoken. And I guess as our teams probably were a little bit worse later in the career, I had to use that more and more to try and get the most out of the players on the team. Whereas I guess through those late 90s when we were winning a lot, we had so much talent in those teams that and we had a lot of senior players that already knew what to do, that I didn't have to do that much extra really as captain.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's fantastic in terms of the on the floor stuff, and obviously, you know, what you know, with like 525 NBL games. So I guess a lot further along you go, the more experience you get, it sort of speaks for itself. And like you mentioned with Mark Davis, it's like when you tell people, listen, just because you got the runs on the board. On the off the court stuff. So, you know, when you're a captain and you know you're looking at recruiting, whether it's imports or Australian players, are you? I guess every team's going to be different, but are you involved in that? Do you have meetings with coaches about putting your input into who you're going to recruit as the captain?
I didn't have really any input with, and Phil was my coach for 11 odd seasons, and him and Steve had really good chemistry. They knew what they wanted. I guess, I don't know, it was luck or good fortune and probably a bit of research on their side, but to get players like Darnell and Kevin Brooks here through that when we were really good. I mean, it's such a big part of the team. Recruiting, I think recruiting is 70% to 80% of the job. I've seen some really bad coaches win championships because they've recruited well and not well. But it's so important to have the talent and the right sort of talent. I've seen some really talented players come out here, but as you said, off the court, they're not very good and they're destructive. And I've seen players come through Adelaide while I was here and since I've been here that can really tear a team apart. And I think a lot more time should be put into that side of things in the recruiting process rather than just looking at the talent that they're bringing on the court.
Right, like their behaviour, their work ethic, those sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, like a really recent example is probably Randall. That
with CJ,
so talented with CJ, ridiculously talented, but and I wasn't that close to the team to be able to see what was going on, but it just looked really destructive. And from what I understand, he was a reasonable part of that. I look back to when I was playing, and Julius Hodge came in, and he was a sensational talent, but ended up off the court, created a few problems and probably tore the fabric of the team apart a little bit. So, yeah, just those sorts of things can probably take a bit more time to pick those players.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it would be worth, definitely worth spending a lot of time getting that side of it right rather than just going off a few YouTube videos of how good someone is or some stats. Now we talk about those. You mentioned the incredible team you had in the late 90s, and obviously won 3 out of 4 championships. Winning 1 championship's pretty hard, but winning 3's obviously bloody hard. Because the reality is you've got to keep getting back up and not get complacent, and everyone else is, you know, might take a night off against second last or last place, but every time you're getting on the floor, they're coming for you. Do you have any comments on sort of how you managed to keep them going and the nucleus of the team going, and and I guess not get complacent because you'd reached, as I said, the holy grail, and now it's a few months later we've got to start from scratch and do it all again. How do you make that happen?
Well, I think for me, a few of the team had been to a grand final series in 1994. We played against North Melbourne and were probably close to favourites going into that. They played exceptionally well, led by D-Mac, and Paul Rees won the MVP of that final series, who ended up coming and playing with us. So a lot of us were hurt by that experience and wanted to get back and have a chance. In 98, we had a great team, but we came up against the Magic, who were 22-4, I think, that year. They were pretty much unbeaten. I don't think we beat them in the regular series, so to sweep them was a bit of a surprise. So then after we won, to come back again, they were still very strong, and we were up near the top. And I think it was also new to us, and that feeling of being champions, we wanted to go out. And you watch some of the Bulls stuff, the documentaries, and how you kind of walk in with that kind of like you're not better than everyone, but you have that confidence in yourselves walking into venues. You know that people are going to throw everything at you, but you kind of walk in expecting to win. And I think that's what we did in that second year. We had a lot of confidence. We only lost John Riley from that and Dean Brogan from that first year, but we were lucky enough to bring in David Stiff, and he made a huge impact on that team. He hadn't won a championship as well, and we kind of said jokingly to him at the start of that year that we would win the championship for him that second year, and we went on and did that, and then he's gone on and won more championships than all of us, so, which is really good to see because he's such a good bloke. But
well, we hope to have him on the podcast at some point, because there's nothing but positive stuff we hear about him, and also Waxy mentioned what he does with the Players Association and looking after the guys these days. And just a massive workhorse of a guy. It's kind of like that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember watching him as part of you guys, and it's like when you're selecting a basketball team and you don't pick the guy that's, with no offense to him, that's the most talented, but the guy that's going to scrap on the boards, that's going to be a pain in the butt for the other team. And it's like someone you really want to play with. Is that sort of what it was like playing with David Stiff?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, like the epitome of role players, in a lot of those teams, we had some unbelievable role players. You look at what David Stiff brought to the table. You look at what Rupert Sackwell, Paul Rees, all of those sort of guys, Mark Nash in the later years as well, just played their roles perfectly. And if you do get him on, you'll get some really good abstract thinking, but yeah, he does some great stuff with the guys now, and he's good just to have around basketball. He's a good human being.
Yeah. Well, he's a psychologist, is that right, in his own right?
He would have been the last person that I think anyone that played with him would have thought would go on and be giving people mental advice, because he always drew stuff from kind of everywhere and came at it from different angles, which I think is probably what makes him really good in that field, to be able to think a little bit different and abstractly about problems and being able to solve them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good insight for all of us and the listeners. So during this period, obviously, we're talking about the championships and those sort of things, but you also had some pretty big tournaments in there, talking about the Olympic Games. So was that something you, I guess, grew up thinking was a possibility, or it was too far off? And then when you got, obviously, the opportunity to play firstly in Atlanta, what was that selection when you get told, is that obviously 1996, we're probably not talking emails and text messages. What was it like being told you were in the Olympic team?
Unbelievable. For me as a kid growing up, that was the main goal for basketball. It wasn't to go to the NBA. I think at that stage, to get into the NBA when you weren't brought up through the American system was near impossible. Like you look at some of the players that weren't in the NBA at that point that play in Europe and even Australia, they would easily be in there now and in today's game. But back then it was really hard to do, whereas for me, my main goal growing up was to play for Australia. I'd grown up watching Phil Smyth, Andrew Gaze play against Russia and play some games, and to put the green and gold on, I think, was the biggest thrill for me. Our process to make that team was very hard. Barry Barnes was the coach. He'd taken over from Adrian Hurley, and we had some very intense training sessions, and I was still relatively young at that point. Our teams were starting to get better and better. And, yeah, I think I was picked as kind of like your 10th, 11th, 12th player on the end of the bench to get experience for hopefully down the line for future Olympics. So hence I didn't play that much at that Olympics, but what I was able to learn and the experience was fantastic.
Yeah, there's for the listeners, I'll chuck this in the show notes as well. There are some games on YouTube that you can go back and watch, even some warm-up game. There was one warm-up game against Team USA, I think. It's probably most famous for Shane Hill and Charles Barkley getting into it. But to be honest, I think that was a bit of out of a molehill. It was about 3 or 4 seconds of aggression. And I think if everyone actually goes back and watches the whole game, there's some really interesting stuff in there. And obviously yourself playing. That was the other question I had. Played in number 5 a lot. Did you grow up playing in number 5?
Yeah, I did. I started off in number 5 and just so happened that, I was able to continue through my career, and kind of each stage I got to, the number was available. So, I was kind of a bit lucky to be able to keep securing that number, but, just become a little bit of a trademark for me. And, that was one of the biggest thrills, that Dream Team game in Utah. I was cheering very loudly for Charles Barkley because I wanted to get some court time. Another one in that game was Andrew Vlahoff went head to head with Karl Malone. They went nose to nose, and I would have paid big money to see that one. That would have been a cracker.
Two beasts going at it. And I think Andrew put his hand on Karl to try and calm him down. It did the opposite. Karl said, "What's his hand doing on me?" It was
that was a huge experience. And then I went on and played in the 2000 Olympics, which was a huge thrill. And having Andrew carry the flag was great for him, for basketball, to get that acknowledgement. And I guess it was pretty well documented at the time. I wasn't that happy with my court time at the 2000 Olympics. We had just won the 98 and 99 championships. I got MVP of the championship in 99, was probably playing my best basketball, and just wasn't getting on the court, and made that known at the end of that tournament that if I wasn't going to get that opportunity, then it was probably better to give someone else a chance in the team, because clearly the coach at the time didn't have faith in me. And then it kind of worked through and worked out, and was able to get some good court time under Brian Goorjian at my last Olympics.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I mean, what more can you do if you're cleaning up the awards and you're winning championships? I mean, there's not much else you can do there. I guess one of the other questions I had on that was, like you've pretty much just said, during that period you were hot property, and I guess in my opinion you would have been. I watch a bit of Eurobasket, and I know a lot of Australians do now that it's on TV. In my opinion, you would have been a coach's dream to play Euro basketball, the way, just your style of play. With how successful you were sort of 1998 through 2002, 2004 especially, did you have people tempting you to go to other places to play?
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't really looked at it much through my career. After the 2004 Olympics, I kind of sat down with my manager and said, look, I wouldn't mind having a crack at going over to Europe. And so at the time we put together some DVDs and and sent them off to some European agents, and they got kind of spread around. And kind of to our surprise, a couple of weeks later, a team in Turkey contacted me and said that they would like me to come over. And so at the end of it was 2005, I went at the end of the NBL season. I went over and I got the last kind of half of their season, third to half of their season, 3 months, and I played with a team called Beşiktaş in Turkey.
Yep.
And that was a real eye-opener. They're allowed 4 imports there. We had a guy by the name of Khalid El Amin, who was a 5'9" point guard who won MVP of the league and was the point guard of the league. We had Ratko Varda, who was a 7 foot, I think he was Yugoslavian, who was sensational. He won center of the league, and we had a 6'8" American that was very good as well. So I just came on and played some bit minutes. When I was hot, I stayed on a bit longer. And it's a very different style over there. And probably would have liked to have done it if I could have a bit earlier in my career. My wife has Hungarian descent and English descent, and trying my hardest to get a European passport because it's a lot easier to get a gig over there rather than going in as an import. I think back then it was like here in the NBL, if you weren't American, then you weren't going to get a job as an import. And so I was kind of, I guess, lucky to secure that spot there in import.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So it sounds like if any high-level juniors are listening to this, then that do have a dual passport, it might be worth, just from a life experience thing, being something you look into. I guess I do have to ask, just based on previous conversations with professionals that have played over there, did you get paid your full amount?
I did, actually. We went... and probably only because we were very successful. We went through and made it through to the grand final and the grand final series. And so we did get our payments all the way along. And I remember my first payment, I was there for 3 months and got paid at the end of each month. And I was in the foyer of the hotel, and the team manager came over with literally the brown paper bag. And here's your payment for the first month. You might want to count it. And so I was counting through kind of quite a few $1,000s in American $100 bills, and was left a brown paper bag that I had to take to a game in a sports bag. And, it was dicey times, you could say.
Not the most secure way of getting paid.
Sure.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. That's a good story. I'll take you to a date now that you'll know pretty well, the 7th of February, 2009. The main court of the Dome is renamed the Brett Maher Court. Obviously very well deserved. I mean, playing your whole career in one town, having so much success, and then also not just that, but you're off the court stuff, you're being so available to everyone, same as, you're jumping on the podcast today, and people see it all the time. You only have to look on the Adelaide 36ers Instagram, and you're teaching the kids the principles of shooting with the beef, and just your ability to give back is, I think, really deserving of that honor. What was that like? When were you told that was going to happen? And just what was that day like? Because that's, as I said, in Australian sport, it's a massive rarity. Only the best of the best get it. As I said, Rod Laver has had it for the arena. Sometimes AFL players might get like a stand or something. But again, it's only for the best of the best. So I guess who informed you that was going to be the case, and what was the day like?
It was pretty emotional. I was kind of lucky enough. My last couple of years, I was kind of nearly not crippled by it, but had a lot of soft tissue injuries in my calves and Achilles. And so I pretty much picked that end of 2009 season was going to be my last season. So I think virtually everyone knew that going into that last season and playing through that. So through that year, Paul Bauer was the general manager of the 36ers at the time, and he got me up to to his office and sat me down and revealed that that's what they were going to do. He said at the time they were only aware of one other stadium that had done that, or one other team, and that was the Celtics with Red Auerbach.
Right. Yeah.
Echoed after him. And so, it was very, very emotional to have something like that done. I kind of joked at the time that was the only way they were going to get rid of me, but no, it worked really well there. And then there was a little bit of what's going to happen when the team moved over to the entertainment centre, and it was probably a bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. We had to sign all these documents, legal ones, to get it transferred across. And but it's a huge honour, obviously, playing with the likes of great players like Mark Davis, who has a bust and a statue and the MVP award here in Adelaide named after him. But to have the court named after me was a huge thrill.
Yeah, no, well, congratulations. On that note, when you say that you had I guess you'd almost scripted out your retirement because you knew it was sort of coming, you're in the twilight, soft tissue injuries, etc., as you mentioned. Where does the mind sort of go with that? Did you start thinking about whether it's investments or jobs or just take a year off? Was it in that last year that you really put some thought into it?
Not really. I kind of planned in my last contract. I was going to sign a reasonable length contract, and I ended up saying to the club, well, why don't we make a 2-year playing contract, and then we'll transition, and I'll do 2 years with the club up in the office doing on development and media stuff up there. And that worked really well. So I actually took less money in those 2 playing years and helped spread it across kind of 4 years. At the end of 2009, when I was due to go into the office and do that, the league nearly fell over. It pretty much nearly became defunct. The ownership here in Adelaide was very sketchy, and the owners pulled out, and hence all contracts were then null and void. And so my next 2 years were kind of, I was left in the wilderness. All best laid plans don't always work out, and so I copped it a bit there and had to quickly come up with an alternative for my next couple of years.
Yeah, no, well, that's I guess just the ability to sort of pivot and do what you got to do. I guess if I lead on from that, we do see players in both the NBL and the WNBL, even during their playing days, stepping in now to commentary or sports reporting or special comments. When they do that, I mean, obviously you're a terrific speaker and those sort of things, but is there formal training when it comes to that? Because you see it all the time now, or is it just a matter of learning on the job when it comes to things like Channel 10 and all that sort of stuff?
I think it's more learning on the job. I've been lucky enough to be around people like John Casey that I think I don't think anyone better in the game than him at the moment. And we did a podcast together and worked together here in Adelaide doing the recent commentary. And to have, same with basketball, if you surround yourself with the best people, you get better at it. And he's certainly up there. So, yeah, that was a good, fun experience. But, yeah, I sit and I critique the commentators in how they do it. And some are well-rehearsed. Some do a lot of research. Some do not very much. And I think you can tell the ones that don't do a lot of research, but there are some very good ones out there, and like anything, there's some average ones. So, yeah, I've done it a little bit and try my hardest to be as researched as I can. And I think one of my agents, when I was playing, actually put me through a media training course, which I think was invaluable.
Excellent.
A bit of insight into how to do a radio interview, what they're looking for, how to do a TV interview, what they're looking for, how to do a newspaper interview, what they're looking for, and just the different sides of media. And that kind of helped me a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, that's great forethought. That was actually one of the questions we asked Waxy, like, with the Players Association and stuff, like, who's encouraging the players to sort of look at what they're going to do beyond that? Because we were talking about how the AFL require each player to do at least one unit per semester of either university or working a job. I think it was like 4 hours a week or something like that, like a landscaping job. I think it was a Jordan Roughhead was doing. I think was famous for that. Whether he was going to use it afterwards or not, I don't know. And then Waxy mentioned that I think he said Jesse Wagstaff's now done 3 degrees during his playing time, just through the Players Association having the ability to study. And obviously, if you play long enough in the league, you can you can get those 3. Although he's still a fair way off your 525 games.
Yeah, I think he's had 15 years though, isn't he? He's done very well.
He's done a long time, and he's going around again. Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think great advice from your agent to have you looking at those things, because also you're only ever one injury away from it all disappearing. So to have that sort of forethought. So that leads me into sort of the last thing I want to chat about. I want to come full circle and back around, because no doubt the ability to learn from someone like yourself and have someone's, even just with your tour groups, for you to know where to I guess take the tour groups, where they're going to get some really good exposure to stuff that's happening over in the US, whether it's great coaches, clinics, playing in front of people, whatever it is. Where can they find out more about your tour group stuff?
Yeah, we've got a website at allworldtours.com.au, and I try and post as much as I can on Twitter and social media. And I'm very lucky to have Sam Woosnam as the other director of the company, who's been in the business for a long, long time, and is very, very good at what she does with the tours, and has had a lot of experiences in organising games, organising which tournaments the guys go into. But a big part of the tours as well is getting to go and watch college teams play, and getting behind the scenes experiences, and going to NBA games and getting behind the scenes stuff there, as well as getting to do shopping, going to Disneyland, all the fun stuff. I think for a lot of kids, especially that are looking at going to college as well, it's worthwhile to kind of go over and see what you're getting yourself into and dipping the toe. And these tours are great, not only for that, but to get some really good games against some high schools over there that are pretty awesome fun to play in packed out venues, and just have lots of fun while you're over there and meet new people. I still get a Christmas card from one of the families I stayed at when I was 13 years old. So,
yeah, right.
Get some really good friendships out of it as well.
Yeah, so that was allworldtours.com.au. Definitely encourage everyone to check that out, not just because we've got Brett on the podcast, but if you've ever tried to organise a tour before and what games you're going to go to and what schools, it's not easy. So if you can find someone like these guys that are actually going to put it together, that's a gift in itself, because the logistics of organising all of it can feel like a full-time job. So definitely for anyone interested, go to allworldtours.com.au. And this Sam Woosnam that you talk of, obviously an incredible player in her own right, just coaches 5 minutes down the road here, the men in the Dandenong Rangers in the NBL 1 South. So a bit of a trailblazer, I guess you could say, for females, getting into head coaching positions of male basketball. And it's I go down and watch their games quite often, and the gender has nothing to do with it. Like the focus those guys have in terms of the respect for her, and when she's coaching them, it's just phenomenal. Especially considering that the club she's at sort of has been through some turmoil of late, and so she's really having to build something sort of from the ground back up again, and doing a magnificent job. So 2 really good directors for those tour groups. So jump on those, guys. I'll wrap up the podcast there, Brett, just because I'm cognizant of your time. But I really appreciate you coming on. Shared some insights of stuff that people wouldn't obviously be aware of, and just your honesty around things like your core time at Sydney, and then what it was like going to the Institute and all that. I think that's one of the great things about our Australian champions is you guys are so willing and giving of your time. And so for the guys to be able to jump onto a podcast, all your fans and stuff, and actually just listen to what your career's been like, is just phenomenal. You just don't see it in other leagues around the world. You know, my 9-year-old son said, because I show him all your highlights and all those sort of things, and just how accessible you guys are. He turns around and says, "Can you get Allen Iverson on next week?" You know, and I said, "This is what's great about these guys, mate." I said they're fantastic, giving back to the sport all the time, and you just don't see it in other leagues. So, once again, thanks very much, and all the best with what's next.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. Take care, mate.
No problems.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Hardwood Time Capsule. Make sure to like and follow us on our channels, iTunes, YouTube, and we'll see you next time. Take care.